Check the description for the following discount codes. I'm going to keep this review really concise because my thoughts pretty much echo that of my fellow YouTube reviewers that have already had their videos out for the most part. And to summarize, that really is that for the money, you're better off choosing a different brand of wheelbase and accompanying wheel. The price is comparable to the likes of Fanatic DD1, DD2, some of their steering wheels, the LCD add-on, you know, what is it, £400 or £500, something like that. There's a lot of money for an LCD screen, and whilst, you know, the integration is nice when it works, and I'll get to that in a bit, it's just far too much money for, you know, what is just a display at the end of the day. It's just an LCD panel, there's nothing fancy going on there. The reason I say that you're better off choosing something else, I'll very quickly go over the specs, just in case someone doesn't know. It's a 16 Newton meter peak torque direct drive wheel. It is very smooth in its operation. The quick release mechanism for the steering wheel is a tried and tested method, and it's super fast and it's super easy. You literally just put it on, twist this around until it locks into place like that, and you're on, and it's solid. There's no movement in it or, you know, wiggle or anything, and you just pull it off like that. Again, tried and tested, well known quick release. Yeah, apart from it being 16 Newton meters of torque and having the option to put your little screen on, there's nothing really that makes it stand out above any of the others. The reason I don't recommend it for the price point when there are other alternatives is just because of the way it performs, and that's what's important. Already I'm straying from my concise path. The reason we shouldn't choose this, it just doesn't perform very well. The best way to describe it is it feels mechanical and unfinished. And by that I mean the force feedback you get from the motor is it isn't smooth. It's like everything's done in very obvious steps. Like, so if you like texture of the road and what have you, it's like vibrations or the texture is either on or off. So everything's on, off, on, off, on, off. Very jarring, very rough, you know, like a square wave, if you're familiar with square waves and sine waves. It's like they've just sent a square wave to the motor and it's just gone and that's kind of how it gives the feedback. It isn't smooth. It doesn't feel anything like any other wheelbase or like a real car. The force feedback strength is fine, but the way it's delivered just isn't. And even the responsiveness of it, with this wheelbase, when I lost traction at the arse end of a car, I would see my view moving on the screen in front of me before I felt the steering wheel go light in my hand. And that, you know, that's behind what it should be. You should feel it and see it simultaneously. Or if anything, you should feel the resistance drop in the wheel before you really even see a change to your sort of line of sight on the screen, because that's what happens as you rotate. It should be simultaneous, really. So it's a bit slow to respond. The way the force feedback is delivered, the detail, the road texture, curbs and whatnot, very, like I say, like rough and unfinished. And it's like they've just put in a square wave to get the job done, and like we'll come back to that later and we'll polish it up and we'll refine it, and then just haven't. Almost like a beta product, so to speak. And it's just, yeah, for the money you pay, any of the other reputable direct drive wheelbases and steering wheels would be a better choice. You know, construction wise, it's heavy, but that's because it's a fairly hefty motor in there, and you know the quick release is good, but again, it's not their own quick release. It's used on other wheelbases as well, and the design is quite nice. I don't mind this sort of orange, sort of Lamborghini Max Power era type look to it. They do it in black as well, but you know, I'm not going to make this video too long because I can't really recommend the wheelbase. The steering wheel itself that came with it, the fit and finish on this, whilst it isn't bad, again, for the price you're paying, I'd like to see a slightly better finish with the way the Alcantara is fitted to the wheel itself, and they do say it's genuine Alcantara. And again, the switches, the rotaries particularly, have a reasonable amount of slop in them. They feel okay. The buttons feel a bit cheapy, to be honest. Again, we've got this weird analog menu label button here, which is odd. You think it would just be a D-pad, but the wheel itself has a little bit of flex backwards and forwards at the top. You'll have all seen this in other videos, but it's again a little bit of a feeling of almost unfinishedness, you know, not that unfinishedness is a word, but you know what I mean. The magnetic paddles feel nice, but again, from what we've seen, these are used in other wheelbases and wheels as well, so you can't really go wrong. But they do feel very nice, and the analog paddles below are quite smooth, no real issue with that either. The wheel itself feels quite weighty, but I think a big part of that is probably this quick release mechanism at the back. The design, obviously, the colours and what have you, is going to be entirely down to personal preference. But again, this is a difficult video to make because I don't think people should buy it for the price anyway. I think you should buy one of the alternatives. This little screen that I briefly mentioned earlier, the reason there's no footage of me using it is because I only got it to work once, I think. It just keeps losing connection. Whether my camera will focus on those 4 pins or not, I don't know. But 2 of them are noticeably stick out longer than the other 2. Now that's probably intentional. They are sprung pins. But then out of the 2 shorter ones, one of them looks like it's gone in all the way and not come back out. So once I did get this on, and that was a ball ache because the screw holes didn't line up very well. And in fact, on this side, the wiring for the 4 pins, I don't know if you'll see it through this hole, the wiring actually runs in the way of one of the screw holes. So I couldn't fit it properly. And then when I did get it fitted, it only worked for like 5 minutes before the connection was lost. And you know, in those 5 minutes, it was a nice, clear, vibrant screen, no issues. But again, £400-500, whatever these cost, too much money. And it shouldn't be a fiddly ball ache to install it, and pins shouldn't be sticking. Now, I believe this is a retail unit. Will at Boosted Media got a pre-production model, and the vents he had at the back here were actually open. He also had a rusty shaft. Poor old Will. And there was a wire nipped in the back here as well. Now, I did put both of those open on mine. I don't have a rusty shaft, thankfully, and the wire wasn't pinned at the back, but it's still there in the same fashion as what the other reviews you've seen and Will's were as well. So depending who assembles it, it could be nipped. So overall, it's just an overall feeling of sort of beta model or slightly unfinished or pre-production, even though it's not pre-production. And there are things that need refining. If the motor in here is a decent motor and the controller that controls it is decent, then all these little issues that I speak about, aside from screens not fitting properly, are just down to the software and the way it's tuned. And speaking of the software, even that felt a bit beta and a bit ball achy. When I went to install the drivers, Windows gives me a prompt saying it doesn't want me to install them because they're not signed. And you have to, the only option that's lit up is don't continue or don't install, whatever it is. And you have to then click on the small print that like says continue anyway, because Windows really don't want you to do it because they're worried it's, you know, malware or a virus or whatever. And you have to, you know, ignore that and tell it to do it anyway. And then once you get it installed, the actual terms and conditions you agree to are all in Chinese and not in English. So you could be signing your life away for all we know. And then once you do get it all installed, the menus are easy to navigate and to use. Some of the English isn't the best translated. There's little like tooltip bubbles that pop up on every one of the sliders to try and explain what each one does. Relatively straightforward. There's a few things there that don't really need to be there. There's a few conflicting sliders that pretty much do the same thing. Again, there's this whole overall feeling of unfinished beta tester type of experience with it. And you know, for the money that this all costs, like if you get this with this wheel and with this screen and then you buy their pedals, which are over there as well, you're looking at a couple of grand. you know, and that is just not the sort of experience you should get for that sort of money. So that is my review of the Moza or Moza. Every time I say Moza in my head, I picture Will and his Australian accent of Boosted Media going Moza, and that's just how I say it in my head. But Moza or Moza, whatever it is, the R16, that's my review of it. It's not a recommendation. You're better off spending your money elsewhere. If they can iron out these issues, I mean, again, things like the way the Alcantara is fitted to the wheel, and like some of it's just not glued down properly. I don't know whether it will show up or not. Just isn't glued down properly. There's air, you know, under there, and then there's visible glue in other parts as well. And the quality of the switches on the front, those sort of things aren't. That's just like you could have used better switches, you know, or you could have had whoever assembled the wheel assemble the wheel better, you know, properly glue the Alcantara down and whatnot. But the performance of the motor may just be software related, you know, software / firmware, and so that can be improved. If it's down to the controller in here that actually controls the motor, then that might not be something that can be improved. If the controller puts out a very rough form of voltage regulation and modulation, then that is just how it will be. But, you know, it's speculation, not really going to know that. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't recommend it. I think they did give me a discount code or a discount link or something to put in the description, but I don't really see why you'd want to buy it. But I mean, I might include it just because they've given it to me. Maybe you really like the way it looks, and you're hoping the software will, you know, a firmware update will come out and smooth out the issues with the way the motor works. I don't know, but I'll check, and if it's there, I'll put it there. But my honest advice is, you know, choose a different brand. And I imagine when I do my pedal review, it's probably going to be a similar result, which is what I'm going to shoot in a minute. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and take it easy.